Welcome back to another edition of MMILive. I am your host, Jessica Zych, and boy, do we have a treat in store for you today. Really quickly, I'm the managing director here at Mitchell Martin. We're continuing our leadership series, bringing you thought leaders and real-world practitioners, like our guest today, Maureen Lowman. Maureen, welcome to the broadcast.
Thank you so much. I am thrilled to be here. I'm looking forward to this opportunity of just sitting back and just having a very productive conversation.
Yeah, we're so excited to have you here. And obviously, we're going to get through and talking about how to build and or optimize the PMO. But before we dive into that, which is your area of expertise, I want to kind of lay the foundation of why this is your area of expertise. So for those that don't know Maureen has over 25 years of distinguished experience as a global PMO executive. She has a proven track record in managing and optimizing project management offices across diverse sectors: IT, InfoSec, marketing, brand strategy, compliance, you name it, Maureen's done it. So she's got 2 master's degrees, one in database research, the other in information systems management. So it's really equipped her to, with a deep understanding of data-driven decision-making and the intricacies of complex IT systems. So all in all, I could go on, Maureen, your accomplishments. It's a long list. So, but I know our viewers today are excited to drop, into the topic. So, one of the things that I kind of breezed over, but you actually have a very unique experience in your career that you've done 2 different avenues in terms of building a PMO. So you've built from scratch where there was absolutely nothing in existence, and you've also come into an already functioning or kind of there's some foundation there, and really driven that optimization. Can you take us through kind of how you thought about both scenarios, and when you were met with them, how you kind of wrap your mind around those?
Absolutely. And once again, as I said, pleasure to be here. Looking forward to having this conversation. So, regardless of if you are starting a PMO from scratch from the very beginning or taking an existing PMO to try to enhance it or build it out to something bigger, the first 2 items that needs to definitely be considered, sort of that checkbox, you must first establish what the goals are. So PMO goals and objectives. You need to sit down, you need to have several questions answered that you have in the back of your head. And first of all, it will be, what will the function of the PMO be? Right? Especially it will be a little easier if it's in an existing PMO, then you would say, what has the function been? What are we trying to get that function to be? You also need to understand the role of the PMO in the organization, where that PMO will sit, who will be staffing, what type of resources, whether it's a budget, and all of these questions that I'm just mentioning right now applies to both avenues, whether it is a new PMO or an existing. And one of the most important item that needs to be considered is your champion. You need to have an executive champion. You need to have an executive sponsor. Not to say that the PMO cannot be enhanced or created without it, but it's hard work. Launching a PMO, starting up or trying to grow a PMO, it's hard work, and you will definitely hit roadblocks. And that's the benefit of having your executive sponsor, and also ensuring that you share the same vision.
Like that. When you go, kind of going back to what you were saying in terms of some of those questions, when you're building kind of that how-to track and the structure around it from scratch, you mentioned some of the things that you need to identify and kind of put in place. What importance does technology have in that? How do you evaluate kind of what's there, what's needed? How do you do that gap analysis?
Great question. Technology is everything. The example I normally use, if someone presents you, or if you have the opportunity to build a PMO from scratch in hands, if technology is not part of the vision, I always equate it to someone requesting you or asking you to create Thanksgiving dinner without an oven, right? So if you use, that analogy, technology in order to bring in the automation, in order to have that high level view as far as for the trees, being able to keep track of the portfolio, have reporting functionality, then just be able to manage risk, any risk that comes from a portfolio. You have to have the right technology. As far as evaluating software, what I normally do, I start off with any of the tools online. Just like a regular software, evaluation. You can use Gartner, you can use a lot of the other ones. And I look at all the features and the functionality that all of the PPM tools, the project portfolio management tools. And for the most part, most of the tools, they all have most of the same features, right?
Mhm.
But you have to really think about how you want to use the tool. And also one of the key areas I look for is actually the user experience. That will make or break, the success of your PPM, your portfolio, project portfolio management tool. So the technology is huge. And going back to the sponsor, you also need to make sure that you have a budget for technology,
Mhm.
not just a one time and done, but just like any software, once you have it, it will need updates. You may need to do some reconfiguration. So whether you have a consultant from that third party vendor there to assist you to help build out and also customize your tool to just to be able to address your use cases, because all businesses, everyone is different. I can bring on the same tool just like you can bring on the same tool, but I may be using it differently. And it all depends on your use cases, and the problems that you're trying to solve for.
Definitely. You touched a couple of times on the, executive sponsorship and kind of having a champion internally. Have you found with your experience that the change management component of building a PMO versus, optimizing one is harder than the other, and how involved does that executive champion need to be in either
Yeah.
scenario?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I have to say, building a PMO from scratch, a startup PMO, extremely difficult. And in my career, where I am right now is the first position that I have held that I stepped into an existing PMO. And my mission was to advance it, take that PMO to another level, turn it into a corporate PMO.
Mhm.
When you build a PMO, it is a tremendous amount of heavy lifting from the beginning. It is before you can even start as far as developing processes and policies and, considering assessing software, you have to get buy-in, and you have to get buy-in through, for the entire company or throughout, the entire company. And that's a challenge because there is a cost. You have to secure a budget,
Mhm.
right? So then you're dealing with the finance team, you're trying to prove the reason why you need to spend X number of, thousands of dollars or, to bring in that new tool. You also have to understand what discipline, what business team will I be supporting? If you have a large, diverse portfolio, you may have projects that you are supporting for marketing. You may have projects definitely for IT or technology. You may have InfoSec. You may have compliance projects. It all depends. So you have to make sure that each of the executives for those areas, that you have someone that can back you, put together that proposal, and present it. So that's where most of the heavy lifting is. And another analogy, another, sort of example that I use as far as building, it's like, think about when the railroad, was first being built out throughout, the United States. It didn't exist. It required a tremendous amount of digging. You have to be able to get down into the trenches. You have to be able to be willing to get down into the trenches and also understand how everything will be connected once you start reaching out to the executives. So it must definitely be a partnership. So it is definitely more challenging starting off a PMO. It is rewarding, definitely more rewarding than stepping into one that's existed before. It's a different type of reward, but also set a level of expectation. You cannot build out a successful PMO in 4 months. You can't.
Sure, yeah.
You can build something out, but it's more of, what am I building? Am I building something that is sustainable, that is scalable, or am I just pulling together a group of people that will then just start tackling projects? A PMO is more than just project execution. And unfortunately, that is a lot of where some of the failures happen because people underestimate, one, the amount of work that's needed at the beginning, and
Mhm.
also what that PMO really is. There is a governance around a successful project management office. You have to be able to have the right governance in place. You have to have a charter. You have to have a mission statement, vision statement, your KPIs. Okay, now I'm building out this tool that, this area of the business that did not exist before. How am I going to hold myself accountable? How is the PMO going to hold themselves accountable to the executives, right? I'm now coming to the executives to get buy-in and say, hey, I can fix this. I can bring all the projects together. I can help you identify the roadblocks and the risk and also bring InfoSec into it, right? I can
Yeah.
start tracking these projects from the very beginning and understand projects where our data may be exposed or, projects that we may have to tighten up if it's healthcare and bring in a third party assessment to make sure that the tool is safe and protected. There's a lot of layers into it. And if you can identify your KPIs along with your mission statement and your vision statement, it will also help as you start building out that PMO. And also it will serve as a part of the governance structure.
Absolutely. I think a couple of things that you touched on that I want to kind of double click is one, when we're talking about kind of laying the foundation similarly to railroad tracks. And I think it's, we're not just going from point A to point B. There's all these offshoots and there's so much interconnectivity that while it seems like, oh, well, we're just putting together a structure of how projects are going to run. It is much more complex than that. And you really do need each of those interconnectivity points to align and to
Exactly.
allow boat traffic to flow both ways. It's not just a one-way track.
Exactly.
And I think, we hear a lot about it because we work with a lot of leaders in PMO and, whether they're building or optimizing and kind of how they're trying to get their hands around it. It is very complex. And to your point, it's not just, hey, we're just going to slap something on it and get going because we need to move really quickly. You can do that.
Yes.
But when you start to grow and things organically do become more and more complex, or you're taking on more clients or whatever it may be, that's where it can get off the rails very quickly.
Yes.
And you realize, oh, the foundation that I laid is pretty shaky.
Yes.
And you have to come back around to it.
Exactly. And that is a great point because I know in a few of the positions that I stepped into, there is pressure to turn it around quickly. And my rule, and I tell any new position I step into, I always tell them that when I come in, and I will never set X number of months, but I always say when I come in, I will not make changes right away because I want to assess where the organization is, right? If it's an existing PMO, I need to assess the maturity level. So I want to see how things are playing out before I start making changes. If it's a new PMO, I need an understanding of the organization. I need an understanding of the use cases. I want to see the chaos, if chaos exists, right? It's sort of a good, it's a chaos in a good place, a happy place, because I know eventually I will change it. But I first need to understand the chaos. I need to understand the gaps. And that's what I do. So I leave things in place until I can put together a plan and identify the gaps, but not just identify the gaps and then shift to post, right? How will my PMO fix this gap? And then make sure that that is part of the governance structure as you start laying out whatever that project life cycle is, or whether it's an intake process, depending on the types of projects that you're bringing in and where the gaps are. In my current position right now, when I stepped in, I realized, and as I said, for this position, I stepped into an existing PMO.
Mhm.
And when I looked at what was happening, okay, yes, the project managers, they had project plans. Some had project plans, others did not. It was never mandated. So that's an easy fix. I can fix that. But then I started trying to find out what is the source of some of the challenges the organization was currently having. And what I realized that requests were coming in from all different areas, right? Once again, another example that I'm going to use, a house. When you think of a standing house or an apartment, there's multiple entry points. You have a window, you have a door. If you're thinking about the house, you got the back door, you have the front door, may have a back door, you have the deck, garage. Requests were coming in from every angle. And in the, tying it back to business, requests coming in on chat, hey, there's a project starting up. An email,
Mhm.
all of a sudden an email would pop up in my box, oh, meeting tomorrow at 10 o'clock regarding a project. So, and people were just kicking off projects. So I took a step back and realized that's the biggest problem, right? I needed to implement a global intake process that did
Mhm.
not exist. And what does that mean? That means that I had to shut all the doors. I shut the back door, I nailed it shut, I shut the garage. There is one path. If you want to enter in a request, you have to come through the front door. That front door became the intake process that was then built out. So, and that's just an example that I'm, using just to show that it can mean challenges in an organization. It can be different for for pretty much all organizations, business teams. But when you sit down, you have to look at what the source of the problem is. Where's that challenge? There may be many challenges, but what is at the heart of the challenge? And that's where you tackle first. It's a level, hierarchy. Yeah. Getting the project managers to build out project plans, to building out a project plan template so everyone has the same phases that's easy. That
Mhm.
can come after. You sort of prioritize the challenges and then you tackle the biggest, because you really want to see wins, and you will always be able to tackle low-hanging fruit, right? There's always, because you want quick wins along the way, but you start on the journey with the biggest challenge. You start figuring that out, and then gradually you bring in the little easier ones, and where you can get your quick wins and start reporting up to senior executives.
Yeah. I like like what you said, and I nailed it shut.
Yeah. To this day, it's nailed shut, and
You
they
gotta
know
do
that.
it.
I'm like,
You gotta do it.
anyone that tries it, I push them back. You're not entering through the front door. I don't hear you. I
Yeah, and look, that's something that, I think to a lot of people that may be listening, you go, well, that sounds like a pretty simple thing to do. But when you really changing the behavior of people coming to your PMs and
right,
coming in all of those different ways that they have been so used to doing for so long,
right,
that is a huge effort to get it all going through one
yes,
avenue.
yes.
It sounds like a small thing, but it really is. It can be extremely challenging. I
Oh,
know
it's
for a
change
fact.
management, and that's another area for PMOs that I failed to mention. Change management is huge. Change management and risk management, and it is not so much taking away, because a lot of the users, or different people in the organization may feel that, oh, we've always done it this way, now you're making it complicated, now I have to do what. It's taking some of the things away, but offering and presenting that, hey, if you do it this way, here are some of the benefits, right? It's change management back, inside out. And that is part of a PMO to be, successful. You definitely have to have a strong change management strategy. And you also need to add the people into it, right? Successful PMO, it is the P's, the 4 P's. You have the portfolio, you have the program, you have the project, and the fourth P is people. People as far as my external clients that I call external, and they, even though they're in the company, they're not directly on my team. So they may be the other business teams, right? And then I have my internal, I have my team that is closest to me. And absolutely, once you implement PMO governance, it may make the project manager's life somewhat more complicated, but it's good complication, right? And that's what I tell my project managers: complicated in a way that now they are required project plans. Now I do meet with them, because if I'm running the global PMO, I am responsible for every project. And anytime my project managers may say something, I'm like, well, you have 5 projects, which is a lot. I understand the workload, but you have to work with me because I'm responsible for 50, 60, 70 active projects in flight, where at any given time, as a PMO, as far as how my PMO has been built out, I'm accountable for all those projects, right? And
Mhm.
that's the other thing. If you're going to the senior executives to build out a new PMO, you have to be able to put yourself out there and make you are now accountable. So there are things that I have to implement to make sure that the PMO is functioning. I can provide my leaders with the information they want. I can make sure that PMO governance is in place for compliance. If we ever get audited, I have to make sure that the InfoSec part is taken care of, because if I'm building out a new system or implementing a new system that will house PII, what are the
Mhm.
steps we need to get, if we're bringing in a third party vendor, did we complete the vendor risk assessment? Because now the test files for that vendor will have PII. I need to protect the company. What are the security measures on the side of the vendor? So there are a lot of layers to it, but it can be done. And as I said, it's very rewarding when you see the fruits of your labor starting to come through, and also setting the level of expectation. And just from my experience, I can't speak for everyone, but I know you know in my past, as far as building out a PMO, you can't go from 0 to 90. You have to take it slow. And I would say it takes maybe about a good solid year to year and a half when you're building out a PMO. And that is if you have all of the backing. That's if you have your executive sponsor and your budget in place. It will take about a year or so before you actually start seeing the benefits of it. And then from that point, crawl, walk, run. Or if you want to put skip in between, crawl, walk, skip, and run. I've put a lot of skips in between, just to try and get some quick wins. So, and that's where it is. You just have to take, small baby steps into it.
Yeah, I think it's so important to manage those expectations because,
Hmm.
like you said, it happens where someone else may come in and say and make all these promises and say, hey, I can do that in
Yes.
3 months. I can get this thing kicked off the ground like
Yeah.
this. And to your point earlier, you can make certain strides, and you'll start to see those micro moments of brilliance, and it's coming together and we're almost there and like we're making progress. But when you are building it in a way that, to your point, is scalable, it's
Hmm.
sustainable, it's something that that foundation isn't going to get rocky if we
Right.
add 30 more clients and 80 more projects. Like, we have a solid foundation that can take on whatever happens now. Those things take time, and
Yep.
having that, you know like you said, the executive buy-in, the sponsorship, but also just that awareness and helping everyone in that, you know in the organization understand that, the people, your PMs, right? Like, they
Hmm.
have to understand this is not a light switch situation. Like, we're going to make
Exactly.
these micro
Yes.
decisions that will add up over time, and
Yes.
you'll start to see how beneficial it is even to your PMs who may
Hmm.
be frustrated and, hey, I've
Right.
got requests coming in 40 different places, like I
Right.
can't keep my head on straight. And helping them understand how these things, while they may be painful at first,
Yes.
they do reap the benefits down the line. So
Right. Right, exactly. And also, once again, as I said, you have to understand your business. That is key. Because if you are tasked to start up a PMO, you may decide to do it in phases, right? Because there's, multiple types of PMO. You have an individual PMO, or which is just, you can just say, okay, this is for, my department alone, and I just need to get a handle on the projects coming in just so I can report to my boss. I may be the PM, or I may have myself and another PM. And then we have the departmental or the department PMO, which, expands out. And then you have the overall corporate PMO. So if you know that your vision or your end goal is your corporate PMO, you can start as an individual or department PMO. You can start small, and then gradually, as you get buy-in, and gradually as your budget increases, and gradually as you bring on more people, because once you get to the point of corporate PMO, you are responsible for developing the processes that you will then push down. You are responsible for governance. You may not be responsible for working with the PM that's actually executing projects, because you're sitting more on that management business side of making the wheel turn, oiling the wheel, right? If the part of the wheel is broken, calling the repair people and bringing in another, part to make that wheel turn. So there's different levels of it, but no matter which side of the PMO you're on, it still falls back on working together and understanding your business and the business needs. Being able to execute projects from start to finish. Still looking at that on time and the delivery and what commitment. And another area that I implemented with my project team execution, every project from the very beginning needs to have your success criteria, right? If I am being asked to execute a project, I need to know, what's your expectation. When we get to the end of the line, what will make you happy to say check mark, check box, check the box, yes, it was a success. So understanding the work that needs to be done, really honing in on the scope, and all of everything I'm just mentioning right now feeds back into the intake. And that was the reason why, as I said, when I stepped in to see, okay, what's broken, where are the gaps? It was the intake, because if you have a tight intake process, you can eliminate a tremendous amount of issues that come down the road once the project gets into flight and it becomes an active project. And all of the moving pieces are in place. I mean, and all of the pieces are moving quickly. You need to try to get it in place. And that's where the success criteria is, and just being able to have that maturity model in place. As I said before, if you want to start small, individual PMO department before you get to the enterprise type PMO, build out a maturity model. Because I did that as well when I stepped in to enhance and take the PMO to the next level. That can mean anything. It's like, okay, what does that mean? Does that mean now that, okay, I'm just going to require project managers to, submit project plans and send out weekly status report? What is the definition of that next, the maturity level? What is that definition? I need to work with my bosses. I need to work with the executives to make sure that my interpretation of the matured PMO is also the shared, we have that shared vision.
Absolutely. We're coming up on time, so I want to be conscious of everyone's time, but we have covered a breadth of information, but we also haven't touched on a lot. So if you're not familiar with Maureen, go give her a follow on LinkedIn. She's got a lot of great content out there and always bringing more knowledge, and connect with her, ask her questions. She's a wealth of knowledge, and one of my favorite people for a multitude of reasons. But I so appreciate you coming on, Maureen. It was so good to hear your perspective. And it is so broad, and you brought so many nuggets of wisdom. So we thank
Thank
you so
you.
much.
Thank you for the
Um,
invite. I had a wonderful time. I truly enjoyed this conversation.
Absolutely. And for those who aren't familiar, give us a follow on LinkedIn at Mitchell Martin, or you can go to mitchellmartin.com. We're bringing thought leaders, true practitioners like Maureen, to the table. Leaders that are talking about how to actually get things done, and to make a change within your organization and to shape your career. So give us a follow there. And until next time, Mitchell Martin Live is out. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.